Good evening. Try it again. Good evening. Here we go. Thank you all for being here. My name is Paul Reville. I'm a faculty member here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and proud to be the head of the Education Redesign Lab. And we're thrilled to have you with us for this last Asquith Forum of the semester. Asquith Forums, as you know, are part of our conversation both in-house within the HGSE community and in our larger community, where we sort of encourage conversation, debate, the sharing of ideas about key education issues of our time. These sessions are free and open to the public, and we are aiming at engaging our community in civil discourse about important topics that frame our future. We're gathered here today to talk about what's a renaissance in leadership and education, about mayors taking a major role in guiding their communities in the way our communities interact with, support, and help educate young people to be prepared to be successful in college and careers. And we've had various waves and phases of this kind of work, but in particular in recent years, we've seen mayors, sometimes in the absence of leadership from other levels of government, step forward and take on the mantle of focusing in on children and what it takes to prepare children to be successful. This session, actually this evening, is part of a gathering that's being sponsored by the Education Redesign Lab of an initiative that we call By All Means. And the 4 mayors that are before you tonight are part of a cohort of 6 mayors from across the country who've been selected and have been hard at work over the past couple of years because of their vision of what they want to do for their children in their communities in order to prepare those children to be successful. And we have them here, as we do twice a year, with teams, children's cabinets in each of these communities who come together for the purpose of taking a holistic 360-degree approach to what it takes to build personalized systems of opportunity and support to enable each and every child to come to school each and every day through their education career, ready to learn and ready to achieve at high levels, ready to be prepared to be successful, whatever they choose to do moving forward in their lives and careers. So we're really proud of the work that's here and you'll hear about this evening. These mayors have a vision about what it takes to make their communities prosperous and what it takes for their young people to be successful. They're in effect crafting a new social compact between their communities and their families and their children. And they're recognizing that schools alone just can't get the job done. Schools consume only 20% of children's waking hours. They play a critically important part. They've made a huge difference in the lives of children. We had former U.S. Secretary of Education John King with us this morning, and he said resonantly that schools are about saving lives. That's how powerful schools can be. So nothing in what is said this evening should in any way diminish the importance of schooling, but we are also being attentive to all the other aspects of children's lives. In this society of growing economic inequality, diminishing social mobility, we have to pay attention to more factors in the lives of children beyond what happens in schools. And these mayors are committed to that, as we are at the Education Redesign Lab, where we're committed to changing the conversation on what constitutes education reform and thinking of it as child development and education and a much broader conversation than we've had to date. So we're thrilled to have you with us for this conversation this evening. We have a wonderful and ideal moderator, a colleague from the Kennedy School of Government. Jorit de Jong is a lecturer in public policy and management at HKS. He's the faculty director of the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, which is a joint program of the Harvard Business School and Harvard Kennedy School, funded by and executed in collaboration with Bloomberg Philanthropies. In addition to co-chairing executive programs for the mayors, as part of the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, Jorit is the faculty co-chair of 2 open enrollment programs, Creating Collaborative Solutions and Innovations in Government. in governance. In 2014, UART launched the Innovation Field Lab, an experiential learning and outreach project sponsored by the Ash Center that connects HKS students with 5 cities in Massachusetts through real problem-solving efforts. Before coming to Harvard, UART co-founded Kafka Brigade, a social enterprise in Europe that helps governments diagnose and remedy bureaucratic dysfunction. UART holds a PhD in public policy and management, a master in philosophy, and a master in public administration. We're delighted to have you with us chairing this important discussion, UART. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be here with this great lineup of inspiring public leaders, and also to be introduced by you, also an inspiring public leader who has now come to academia to do revolutionary things with the Education Redesign Lab, and it's been a pleasure to work with you and your team. Thank you for introducing me and telling that I'm from Europe, so people don't have to worry where my accent is from. I'm Dutch. I'll do my best to work on my Boston accent, but I still have a lot to learn from Joe Curtatone. I have learned a lot from him already because he is my co-instructor in the education reform, in the Innovation Field Lab, the other lab. I've also had the pleasure to work with the other 3 mayors in the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. So it's great to, as Greg Fisher said, to get the band back together. And see if we can have an exciting conversation that doesn't only involve us, but involves you as well. So we'll have a conversation for about 45 minutes, and then we'll turn over to you and for 30 minutes hear from you. What's on your mind, and what would you like to ask the mayors? So first, a couple of words about the topic of tonight, city leadership. So the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative is obviously a program that was made possible by Bloomberg and Harvard. And it's not just the generosity of Michael Bloomberg that made it possible, but also the collaboration with Bloomberg Philanthropies, who are investing in government, in the public sector, to create better social outcomes. And it's been a great privilege to work on this important topic, especially in these times where the confidence in federal government and sometimes state governments is not as much as it used to be, and where cities are increasingly looked at as the leaders in reform, not just in education, but also in climate resiliency and in immigration reform and in many other issues that are on our mind and that are important to society. So city leadership seems to be a very timely topic. But what does it mean? We all know what cities mean, but you know, there's some confusion about what the definition of a city is. Some people say it's the absence of physical distance between buildings and people. That is actually a definition that has been promoted. I prefer a different, less cynical definition of cities. I'd like to think of cities as concentrations of human potential. But then, of course, how do we bring that potential to life? Leadership is needed for that. But what does leadership mean? Leadership is not the same thing as authority. It is, we all know that people in authority don't always exercise leadership. And that people who exercise leadership do not always have the authority to do so. They take the initiative. So just being elected mayor does not make one a leader. The people we have with us here today have demonstrated great leadership, and it's going to be very interesting to hear from them how they reflect on that and how they do that. My Kennedy School colleague Marshall Gant says that leadership is mobilizing others to engage in collective action in the face of uncertainty. And this is especially true for city leaders who have limited resources and authority, and who shoulder significant expectations, and where an unexpected crisis is always looming around the corner every day. So the purpose of city leadership is to realize the full potential of cities. And I believe that that full potential is realized not just by City Hall, but also by collaborations with other sectors, with the private sector, with the nonprofit sector, and especially with the community. So we're going to talk about how to do that and what the role and responsibility of a mayor is to kind of create those collaborative solutions. So the mayor's program that we have created with the Bloomberg Harvard Initiative brings 40 mayors together every year in an executive education program. And what we do as Harvard is facilitate the learning among these mayors. The mayors learn a lot from each other, learn a little bit from us, maybe, hopefully, but they especially learn from discussing the challenges and really, supporting each other in the work that they do. We also have a senior leaders program because mayors can do it alone. So each mayor gets to nominate 2 people in their organization that they rely on most for making change. And so we've also created this executive education program for senior leaders. And you may ask yourself, do mayors need training? Do they even want training? And of course, that was on our mind when we created the program. If we build it, will they come? And they did come. And I'll read you a quote from one mayor that may be familiar to you. The quote goes like this: "I've never said this to anyone. I literally went home every night for the first 3 months and said, 'Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?' I couldn't talk to anyone about it because everyone around me helped me get elected. So I couldn't go to them and say, I'm not really thrilled about this job." Anybody? Who is this? Mayor Marty Walsh, right? And he got re-elected last week. So he told this to the Boston Globe last summer in an unusually candid interview. The mayor voiced what many mayors feel, though, and think when they're starting out in the most difficult, important, and fascinating jobs in politics. And he's right. Nothing is easy about keeping cities safe and clean and making a diverse population feel included and successful in education, employment, and life. Improving economic development, infrastructure, and public services takes time, effort, and focused leadership. Lyndon Johnson said, when the burdens of the presidency seem unusually heavy, I always remind myself it could be worse. I could be mayor. Right? So that sounds very different. I don't know why you guys signed up for this, but we'll hear in a minute. So the most successful mayors figure out how they can engage others in doing that important and difficult work. How can they engage their staff in working across silos? How can they engage the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and citizens at large in co-producing public value? The great urban economist Jane Jacobs wrote that cities are, and I like this definition, by definition full of strangers, but she also saw that the city's strength were entirely dependent on what she called a great and wonderful crisscross of relationships. It is a city's leader's job to reinforce and grow that crisscross of relationships and to foster a sense of common purpose among strangers. We have 4 very inspiring city leaders with us today who have demonstrated great leadership, not just in investing in children's well-being and education redesign, but also in realizing the full potential of their communities. We'll talk about city leadership, we'll talk about education redesign, and as I announced, you will have 30 minutes to ask your questions, so think about that. And please join me in welcoming Mayors Elorza from Providence, Mayor Schaaf from Oakland, Mayor Fisher from Louisville, and Mayor Curtatone from Somerville. Mayor Fisher, let me start with you. You have not only worked on educational reform and investing in child well-being, but you've taken on many big issues that were bigger than any single department could ever take on. What is the secret of getting people to work across departmental boundaries on such big issues? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, you have to, I think, combine the head and the heart. So when people think about challenges in communities, it very quickly becomes evident they're very complicated. And they cross many areas of society. So it's not like if you take care of one thing, it's going to take care of everything. So, and in today's world, it's tough, to get people to think beyond a headline, right? So once you identify a problem, let's say, for instance, we're working here in Boston today and tomorrow on education and success for every child, by all means. Okay, so do your people in your community care about something like that? Well, gosh, if we're not very persuasive salespeople if we can't get everybody in our community to agree that every child should have a chance to succeed in today's world. And when we take a look at some of the challenges that we're facing as a country right now, and it's especially evident in our streets since Ferguson, Missouri, we've had a dozen or so outbreaks of significant civil unrest in our cities. We see people basically saying that they feel disconnected, they feel hopeless about the future. I believe that's what we saw in this last presidential election as well. Now, that came from rural America, if we're to be stereotypical about that. So if we can't get people to get fired up about something like this, to look at each one of their fellow citizens, especially our youngest citizens, and say, I want you to have every opportunity and privilege that my child has, your child deserves that as well. So there's a certain amount of emotional connection that you have to try to make with your citizens. So they're saying, yeah, I may not know how to do this, but sign me up. So that's kind of the starting the culture moving forward. Then the question becomes harder is, okay, how do we do this? So when you try to move massive systems like education or healthcare or housing, you've got a lot of adults in these areas that own space and may not necessarily be ready to move toward a greater good. They might think they're part of the greater good, but when it comes to realigning what they do for something different, that's hard to do as well. So we put systems into place in the case of our By All Means and Louisville Promise work. It's a governing body that talks about, or that is designed to make sure that every child succeeds, not just in school, but out of school, with out of school time, with mentoring, with internships, with apprenticeships, coordinated with our public safety approach in the community. And people come to the table because, one, they might agree, or two, they might be shamed to come into the table. And and sometimes in our cities, we don't hesitate to use shame to get people to do the right thing. Because there's something, status quo is the status quo because it's easy just to keep doing the same thing. Our job is to disrupt the status quo so that we can advance toward what the purpose of a city is. And the purpose of that city is to have a platform for human potential to flourish. So it's a combination of heart and head by developing systems and approaches.
So you talked about creating the energy and the support for doing this important work. But when you get people to pay attention to it, when you get them energized to work on it, how do you structure the effort to kind of continue that work in a systematic and performance-oriented way? You mentioned the By All Means initiative, which really means by all means. So it's not just education, it's public health, it's neighborhood development, it's economic development. And so a lot of different parties have to come together around a newly defined problem or opportunity. How do you sustain that collaboration?
Well, in our case, we have a collective impact is what we call this. There's a couple of different words that these initiatives go by, but they're cross-functional in nature. In this case, it brings together people from all aspects of life, not just education, but social services, housing, public safety, business, nonprofits, foundations. It is resourced. You have to resource these efforts with finances, one, to show you're serious about it, but then two, to have the staff in place to help you move the work along. You have to have a group of dedicated and passionate citizens that will serve on various board structures within this as well, that meet on a regular basis to not only lay out the big goals and the visions for the community, but also to make sure we're monitoring and diagnosing and moving forward that way. So it takes structure, it takes resources, monitoring and diagnosis, and then just continuous improvement. And communication, I would say, one last thing. Most of these efforts are are not good at communicating both the challenges and the successes that are required then to get the flywheel of momentum going in the city so everybody buys into this, and then whatever our objective is becomes the cultural norm or the cultural expectation for the city. So you can imagine when you're trying to change a culture around education and achievement, that's difficult to do, but that's the ultimate aim of an approach like this.
So maybe I can build on that point and ask some of the other mayors, how do you communicate the urgency of working on this problem or the opportunity that you see for your city? Mayor Schaaf?
I think part of it has to do with prioritizing it. A lot of people are interested in what the mayor's priorities are. And so when you say, if there were only one thing that I could do as the mayor of Oakland, and it is the Oakland Promise, that has a certain power. I think that, we all got elected because we are good communicators and we are good at hustling resources, for lack of a better word. Some people would call that political fundraising.
That works too.
And so to apply that to your passion, and I think authentically we all are truly personally passionate about this as an issue. And whether that's through our own personal experiences with education or different supports that we got in our own lives, or because through our journeys to where we are now, we have been so profoundly touched by what good interventions can mean in a young person's life. We hopefully have the skills to make that come alive and to rally people behind it. And I love how you quoted Marshall Gantz, that in a world of unknowns, of a lot of unknowns, but that is kind of, I think, our secret sauce as mayors, is to get people to invest, to go, to believe in something that hasn't quite been proven yet. But that's our jobs.
Mayor Curtatone?
I guess, something, and you'll figure it out pretty quickly. I'm a disciple of Heifetz, and you'll know why in a second. This to me is all about leadership, and I think an example, one I've used often today and days before, I recall coming to office as mayor at a time when the nation has released health reports that said our obesity rates had tripled over the previous 40 years. And we had just embarked on a partnership with the Friedman School of Nutrition and Dr. Christina Economos and Tufts, which the report stated that 46% of our school-aged children were either obese or risk of being obese. And my question to her is, all right, well, what do we do? What is the role I play? And so much about how you communicate and how do you get, really the question is, how do you get people to own the work? And leadership isn't owning the work yourself or investing in self-aggrandizement that you're the only person who can solve the problem. And Shape Up Somerville, which was the worldwide model of reversing childhood obesity in a generation, was about giving the community and the stakeholders the work, much like we're trying to do today in closing the achievement gap and giving every chance and opportunity to achieve and succeed. And I played the role of that ambassador, of putting out the information and talking about, don't we want to grow the healthiest generation in our society and not the unhealthiest generation? I think that's the role we have to play in terms of leadership sometimes. Sometimes it's pointing to the data that gets people at the edge of their chair, not let them fall off, but turn up the heat enough to get them off the back of their chairs. And I was excited to play that role before, and it proved. And when I always look back over the years, and 14 years now, completing my 14 years being mayor, I always ask myself, what would leadership have looked like in that situation? Who did I bring along? Who got to own the work? Who do we leave behind? And that's how it's sustainable moving forward.
So Mayor Fisher mentioned disrupting the status quo. You said raising the heat. You said communication. One of the priorities for you, Mayor Lorza, is to engage the public in this work. Can you explain what you mean by that and how you do it?
Sure. I think that mayors are perfectly positioned, especially right now when you look at our communities and you look at the country. There's so many forces that are pulling us apart, right? And it seems like these forces are becoming more and more intense every day, every year. But if you think about cities, right? We talked about the definition of cities. If there is one purpose that cities have had from the beginning of time, it's to bring people together, right? And so us as the figureheads and us as the leaders for the city, we're in this perfect position that we can be this uniting force. And so, in our communities, people care deeply about these issues. And sometimes they care very loudly about these issues. We see this as an asset. So how do we engage this energy into what we're doing and turn it into this productive force that brings more unity to our cities? And we've done that around education. We've done it in a lot of different ways, but in particular about education, and it ties into this communication piece too. So, we've had this constant challenge that we've set ourselves to, and that's how do we better communicate all of the great work that's happening in the school department and around kids and education throughout the city. And sure, part of it is because we want people to know all the great work that we're doing, but it's much deeper than that. It's about how do we convey a sense of optimism about the momentum that we're building in our city so that people feel connected, people feel engaged, and through this virtuous feedback loop, they can then be part of, substantively making these initiatives even more impactful and even greater. I think that we heard here that community change happens at the speed of trust. And the more that you engage people, the more you're transparent about the work that you're doing. I believe Paul has also mentioned that people support the things that they help to create. So the sooner that we engage the community, the more they feel invested in what we're doing. Selfishly from our perspective, the better they'll see the good work that's happening, but unselfishly and substantively, the more they are going to be stakeholders and will be able to leverage their energy to further what is our collective agenda. And so I see this as vital to getting our work done, but I also see it as a great opportunity for mayors to step up and play that leadership role in bringing communities together when at every other level of government, it's increasingly difficult for folks to do that.
So when I hear you all speak to this issue, it seems like creating that energy, both in your organizations, in other sectors, and among the community is a necessary condition to get the work done. You got to raise the level of heat, to quote what you said. But how do you turn that energy then into productive work? How do you turn that heat that you create into policies and into the delivery of those services? So you can think about the conventional structures that are in place for education or support for children. How do you think about the balance between using those conventional structures and new mechanisms such as quasi-public entities, advisory bodies, or what the Educational Redesign Lab has designed, these children's cabinets. So what's the balance between old and new when it comes to harnessing that energy in the community and really turning it into better policies?
So I think you have to have an openness, and when you open up a process to the community, there's a messiness to it. You have to be willing to take that risk and trust the public. You really have to trust that people will come in with good intentions. And I've made it a point that quarterly I have a community conversation in a different neighborhood in my city, and I'll stay there until all of the questions are exhausted. Sometimes folks are angry. Sometimes they're angry about legitimate issues. Sometimes it's not my fault, but I have to stand there and take it.
But then when you go home after a night like that, so the next day you're like, that was an exhausting night, right? But I listened to everybody, and then the next morning in office, what do you do to kind of take those concerns as well as the good suggestions and turn it into improving service?
So I think that there's power in the process itself. I think it's so important for our residents to feel as though they're connected to what happens in City Hall. Simply being listened to, my being there with all of my directors, that in and of itself is helpful. But then you also have to listen, right? And folks have to see tangible change as a result of that. And so, we all structure our administrations in a way that we can be responsive to these needs. So if what we're hearing from the community is that there are rats in that neighborhood, well, then our Department of Public Works has to be equipped and ready to go out and do that work. And so a lot of the work that we do around simply running our administrations well, good government, using technology, using data to improve our systems, to continually improve. It all ties into engaging the community so that they're a part of what we're doing. And if they're engaged and they're a part of what we're doing, we exponentially increase the capacity of what we're able to do.
So thank you. Mayor Curtatone was actually quoted as the mayor of the best-run city in Massachusetts, and is actually helping to improve other cities to do that work. So what is your approach, your philosophy of turning that energy into actual operations and policies?
Well, there's no static formula or approach to it. I see it, again, Ronnie Heifetz will say, there's this beautiful waltz happening on the dance floor and you're up in the balcony. Today it feels more like a mosh pit, quite honestly, out there, and you decide whether you're going to jump in. But to launch from where Mayor Loggia just mentioned, there is no longer what is conventional, non-conventional. We want to identify as many allies and stakeholders on a value proposition and pluck those value strings and get them to own the work. The process isn't easy. Leadership isn't easy. It's a rather very lonely enterprise at the end of the day. The work is hard, but you can't let people off the hook. You got to keep them there in suspense, in that constructive stage of disequilibrium to do the work necessary. But when we land at the end of the day, it's so much stronger, so much more unified. I mean, I can point to examples, again, when I go back and try to diagnose what would leadership have looked like in that moment. And even the circumstances and on the merits, if you read a white paper on it, you say, wow, the mayor got it right. I can tell you where we feel in leadership, because we left too many people behind in the conversation. So it's no longer who should be at the table, but as many allies and stakeholders, both within and within the organizational structure with the community as possible.
Yeah, and I want to add, the collective impact framework, I think, has been a great tool for folks like us. And it is.
Can you explain to us what you mean by that?
It means having a really big table, right? It means not being afraid to kind of take it all on, because we recognize that everything is interconnected. In Oakland, I was, you might ask why I'm on the stage, when I abolished the mayor's education cabinet. Every mayor had an education cabinet, and I abolished it, because I wanted to put my energy into strengthening something that had existed for a long time, but was kind of dormant, which was a joint powers authority among the county, the school district, the city. So again, a lot of the leadership is spread out a little bit more, which can be scary for some people. And it's messy, it's uncomfortable, but like you said, it's so much more impactful.
But I want to demystify it a little bit. So I'm a business person that just happens to be mayor. And the difference between running a business and running a city is, with a city, everybody's on your team, right? We get the full bell curve of life. And it gets really interesting on the edges of the bell curve, I can tell you. When you have a business, you get to select your employees, you get to select your customers, so it's a much narrower band of variation that you have than in public life. But a lot of the same principles apply, right? It's, okay, what are your guiding values, number one? I think this is where a lot of cities fall short. And leaders in general, they don't start with, what do we all have in common as human beings? Talking about our value of compassion, kindness, love, hospitality, that we all should start with, and then we can get into tactical disagreements. In today's world, it's like, boom, it's just everybody goes to their own corner, you lock down, nothing gets done. How about if we remind ourselves that maybe we salute the same flag, we have the same values in our hearts, and then we can go from there. But then the same kind of visioning starts and planning starts. And I think what we've done in particular that's been effective is, we dedicate resources to what we call the job. And when I got in government, what I found was there was a serious lack of training offered to people to optimize their human potential. There was functional training on how to better do your job, but there wasn't training on how to be a better project manager, or how to be a better problem solver, let's say, skills that you can take with you into any environment. So we've done that with our city, and I've done 3 transformations in the private sector, and we're doing a transformation in the public sector here. And I can tell you, government employees respond just the same way, maybe even in a more appreciative way, because they're not used to getting that type of training. So we say the job is daily work, continuous improvement work, and innovation work. Why do we say that's the job? Because when you ask somebody to do something, they can't say, that's not my job, okay? So And depending on where you're at in the organization, you spend different amounts of your time in daily work and improvement work through our Louis Stat organization. Teresa Reno Weber's here. She designed that for us. And then our innovation work. And by resourcing each of those areas, you can methodically go about knocking off your big goals and your daily goals. And that's how you get big stuff done over time.
So you created the Cradle to Career support structure in Louisville. So everybody who's working in that support structure knows what their job is. It's innovation and
continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement, right? And so how does that relate to the conventional structures? Are they still in place, or is this structure replacing that conventional mechanism for?
Well, in Cradle to Career right now, it's a hybrid that's in transition, because there is no organization that exists to bring all resources together to bear on the success of each and every child, right? So you have the school system that most people misidentify and mischaracterize as the solution to everything, whereas the reality is we just drop our kids off at school with all of the beauty and flaws that they have, and then they're in under-resourced schools, maybe very challenging situations, high free and reduced lunch, traumatized kids, and then we're supposed to pick them up at the end of the day and expect the school system to take care of that? So we're redesigning how people look at education and advancement of a full and healthy child in all characteristics, not just in the classroom where we're familiar with language, let's say like a kindergarten ready or third grade reading level. But what's the language that we use around physical and mental health readiness, social and emotional learning readiness? We're not used to having that conversation as society. But what we know is when we see the gaps, the achievement gaps that our kids have between those most well off and those that are not achieving, which is primarily our community of color, we don't have the language to discuss that and share it in a non-judgmental type of way, you know, where people don't look at it and say, this is a real inclusion problem for us as a society. Of course we're going to resource in these areas so each and every one of our children have an opportunity to succeed for us. So we're having to create that framework, create that language. This is difficult because people aren't used to a language like this. So we're creating the Cradle to Career, if you will, with its own governance structure, of which our public school system, our superintendent Marty Polio is here, and many of our JCPS partners are a critical, huge part of that, as well as early care and pre-K, and then our post-secondary, and then our employers, because what's going on through all this is our workforce needs are pulling this through. And then when the business folks are at the table, then all of a sudden it seems like the rest of the community takes it more seriously. Otherwise, it's just some social do-gooder program is what some people characterize it as.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Providence. So when you first got elected as mayor, you started an initiative, Providence Reads, right? And you've done a lot of efforts that make investing in child well-being more equitable across the city, especially minority communities. What was the challenge in terms of building a structure to support that work? It was all cross-boundary work, and it was new and innovative. So similar to Mayor Fisher, what did you do to sustain and support that work?
Sure. So it wasn't a program that I started. It was started by the previous administration, but it had it wasn't achieving the results that it was intended. And so when I came in, we fully adopted it and said, we're going to make this work. And so the program is called Providence Talks.
All right.
And picture a pedometer, but instead of something that measures your steps, it measures the number of words that you hear and that you speak each day. So infants from 0 to 36 months, they wear this word pedometer. And after a month, they submit the pedometer, and we give them a printout. And we give it to the parents, and we show them this is the level of interactions that you have with your children, and this is how it compares to other families with children this age. And it's amazing because you might think that you communicate more or less with your child, but when it's given to you, on paper, there's the data. You can't debate or fight it. It's led a lot of parents to say, "Wow, okay, I didn't realize we interacted so little. We have to up our game here." So there's this competitive aspect that kicks in. And what's so interesting about this program is that when it was originally designed, it was designed as an intervention for children aged 0 to 36. And while I do believe it ultimately met those original goals, what we found is that really it's an intervention for parents. And what we're doing now is we're doing a lot of research on parental involvement and whether that parental involvement carries on even after they're done with the program and their children begin the K through 12 system. So it's amazing, but little things that parents pick up along the way. When a child starts saying ball, we have a home visitor that has gotten to know the family and the child and is able to coach the parent and say, well, when they start saying ball, have them combine words. Big ball, red ball. And this sort of like sets off a light bulb in the parent's mind, and they gain this agency, right? It's empowering to know that the work you do as a parent is having a measurable impact, and you can measure it over time. So that sense of agency has been really heartening to see, and we don't have the data yet, but I strongly anticipate that this is going to carry on even after their children begin the K through 12 system. So it's a very exciting project, and we have a couple of other cities who have replicated it, and where we have our whole shop, and we're ready to share all of our information, our systems, our technology with any other city. It's a program that, for a fraction of the cost of health of Head Start, is having very similar outcomes. So we're really excited about it.
So that project is a success, and does that success translate into an appetite for more innovation? And if so, how does that work?
I think so, but something that is really important to distinguish. Of course, we're all committed to innovation, but there's innovation where there's this shiny, brand new object, this new initiative that no one else has tried. And there's also a different kind of innovation. In many of our institutions, many of our administrations, you have bureaucrats who have been doing the exact same work for 20 years. And if we can bring a growth mentality to the work that they do, no more of, I do this because that's the way it's always been done, but we're going to think of new and better ways to get this work done. I'll take that innovation, culturally throughout the entire system, any day over this, sort of one-off product. So, of course, there's a spirit of innovation that we're continually fostering, but innovation has takes a lot of different shapes.
So we've heard a couple of things, right? One is to create the energy, to raise the heat, to redefine the job for staff working on these issues. And, at the end of the day, the question is, will communication and coordination across these departments be enough to get these new innovations off the ground and to keep improving continuously, or are new resources needed as well? And that's a question I have for you, Mayor Schaaf, because you've been thinking about this, how to create sustainable financing for those initiatives that are so badly needed in Oakland.
Yeah, well, so in Oakland, the Oakland Promise is our kind of cradle to career initiative where, again, we want to have certain innovations that are very equity focused. For example, we want every single baby born into poverty to get a $500 college savings account during their first year of life, as well as immediate $500 of immediate assistance for the families and the offering of financial coaching for families. We want every single kindergartner, regardless of their income, to get a $100 scholarship during their first year of kindergarten. And for the school community, teachers, parents, community, to use that as a tool to really build a college-going culture and to infuse a college-going identity and expectation in every single child in our whole city. We also are working on future centers at our middle schools and high schools to demystify the college acceptance and funding reality, as well as get kids excited about career paths and why education matters, how it's going to get them to where they want to go. And then finally, to make sure that they go to and through college. College dropout is a huge issue. We were just talking about that. We not only provide multi-year scholarships, but also mentors and other persistent supports to ensure that our students are finishing college. Right now in Oakland, only 10% of my 9th grade class will have a college degree by the time they are 25. That is shameful. And in the Bay Area economy with so many opportunities right there, it is particularly shameful. So we had this interesting problem because this is a pretty big, ambitious initiative. It's going to cost money to send that many kids to college and to pop out all these $500 college savings accounts. And so we designed a 4-year pilot. And we took that out to both public sector partners. The county is actually putting some money into this. The school district is putting some money into this. And for the first time, the city allocated money in its own budget for scholarships for kindergartners.
How did you get them to do that?
It's our job, right? It's our job to make them see.
But we want to know, how do you do that?
Again, the idea that it's a pilot and you're only allocating, for the first 2 years, $100,000. Like it was a small ask to begin with. And then when you have those public sector small investments, then you go out to the private sector. And then you get funders excited about the innovations and they want to invest in this pilot. Meanwhile, while you're running the pilot, you have to pull in some really good expertise to build the financial models. Holy moly, what is this going to cost us at scale? Because all children means all children. And I don't know about you, but I am tired of programs. I am tired of programs that help the children that are lucky enough to find their way to that program. We are in government. We control these major public institutions, and we know that they have to be changed. They have got to shift. The inequities, the racial inequities that our public institutions are producing are completely unacceptable. And so when you cost out, what is this gonna cost for every child in my city for at least one generation? It is true that that's a big number. And so we figured out that there were a kind of a combination of funding sources that we thought we could sell publicly to actually get this big, hairy, audacious goal done. The first piece of it, again, this 4-year pilot was $35 million. And again, that was funded through a combination of public and private sources, mostly private. And that's your pitch to philanthropy. Help me prove how awesome this is, and then I will change the way the government spends its money. That is what philanthropy wants to hear, because we control vast amounts of resources. If we can get better results with the public dollar, we are all better off. So that pilot was a big piece of it. Now, as we go for our sustainability model, we are doing two things. And again, we spent some money on an expert to figure this out. We believe that we can raise in the next couple of years a quasi-endowment of $50 million. We think that wealth exists within the Bay Area, and that as the mayor, I have committed myself to raise a $50 million quasi-endowment. Quasi means it will earn interest, and the way we've designed the spend on it is the spend is weighted towards the late years, but it is designed to be spent entirely down within 30 years. But that buys us 30 years. Oh my gosh. And then the second piece is to get our residents to pass a tax. Yes, Oaklanders, they're smart. They get why investing in kids is a worthwhile investment. And so we are going to be asking them next November to potentially put, again, this is still in development, it's a little secretive, but I know we're live streaming.
We call that a fee.
Okay. Like around $190 per parcel. And that would produce $30 million a year. With that money, in partnership with a coordinated sales tax increase that our county government is looking at, we can then fund affordable access to quality preschool for every 4-year-old in our city, and possibly 3-year-olds. It all depends how this all works out, as well as have a dedicated funding source for the Oakland Promises Cradle to Career supports. So that combination, quasi-endowment, yes, let's hear it.
So that's it's really encouraging to see this level of entrepreneurship and innovation and optimism, at the local level, at the city level. At the same time, I think, we should also address the elephant in the room, is that at the federal level, there's a very different
the orange
situation.
Elephant.
And everybody get it, right? Okay. So I think, we should talk a little bit about that. What has changed since the last election in terms of your ability to care for your communities, to invest in your communities, to do your work as a city leader? May I start with Mayor Curtatone?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty on many different levels. On the human level, we're a very diverse city in Somerville. We speak about 60 languages in our neighborhoods and schools. We have a strong, undocumented population. And, when every time President Trump or Jeff Sessions wrenches up the rhetoric against immigrants or to attack DACA or TPS participants, kids don't go to school, families don't seek health care, maybe they don't go to work. Well, now there's the uncertainty with this absurd tax plan, which would really kill any housing production and preservation efforts in our region that needs 435,000 units of housing by 2040, and that people are being displaced, or our ability to deal with critical infrastructure. Really, it's the uncertainty. This job, I always tell people my job, certainly in the last 14 years, but even in the last 5 or 1 year, has become more complex. It's the uncertainty and what the future holds. So can you just imagine the impact? The greatest impact and negative impact has been on the human level to the people in our community. Children are wondering what the future holds for them. We're all wondering, does this nation still believe in its value of being a diverse and tolerant society? Immigrants wonder, is it still a place to chase that American dream? Does a city like Somerville, as progressive as it is it still that city of hope and opportunity? So for us to deal with the very technical pieces of our job, and that's the easy part of it now, but it's really the negative and impactful things that are really hurting us on the human level that make the job more complex. Yeah. And on the education side, we're seeing not just a dismantling of the education advances this country and this nation has made over the last couple of generations. We really have democracy. So I think that's, when we think about value proposition and how to mobilize allies and stakeholders to do necessary work on a nation level, I think it's these things we have to, as mayors, at least I find my role, I have to speak up more often on a national level because it impacts my folks on a local level. When people say, does anybody give you a hard time when you're battling Trump on national TV and I see you on immigration but not talking about potholes and so forth? Those important local transactions are always important, but at the end of the day, people are looking to us to stand up for those core community and, I believe, American values. It gives the immigrants in my community a bit more confidence that we're going to fight for them. It lets people know that we're not going to sit back and see those important pillars of our institutions just be dismantled over time. So I find my job, at least I'm sure the other mayors would concur, to be more complex and somewhat exhausting. And we haven't even gone through a year of this administration. It feels like it's been a lifetime.
All right. Well, I think some of you may know that Mayor Curtatone got reelected last week by 73%.
Nobody else
of the
wanted
vote.
the job.
So you're doing something right. maybe people don't want to hear about potholes as much as they want to hear about community values. So I think that's a great testimony to.
Well, and that's my point.
Yes,
What Mayor Joe
Fisher.
just demonstrated there was, extraordinary leadership by leading with human values, right? I mean, that's what the United States of America is supposed to all be about, that we have some kind of common purpose embedded in liberty and justice for all, not some. And of course, we're living in a world where the data is so much more persuasive about what we know and we don't know. We've seen in our communities of color that have been just taking it for centuries now in a way that they have been tremendously under-resourced. Where we're from in Louisville, racism, institutional racism is in all of our cities, but we're leaning into conversations around racism. After the Charlottesville demonstrations, I mean, the underbelly of our country in terms of white nationalism really was on full display. And so, the question is for us in cities is, well, do you kind of look the other way? Or do we have conversation and activities and actions so that we elevate our community consciousness around these issues and then lean into these issues from a lens of equity that Mayor Schaaf spoke about? Which is really, if we don't do that, I mean, we're in deep trouble, folks, as a society. Now, I'm very optimistic that we will get it right as a country, but the question is how much pain and suffering is going to take place between now and then. There are people that agree with the equity perspective because they just say morally it's the right thing to do. If I can't get people on that lens, then I talk to them about the economic development imperative. We have to have a trained workforce in order for us to remain competitive as an economy. That means everybody has to participate, whether you agree morally or not. Secondarily, from an economic development standpoint, if you raise the wages of people below the median wage in our country, in our city, it creates an additional economy of $2 billion of GDP. That's good for everybody. We're living in an age right now where people look through a lot of change as a win-lose. If they win, I lose, as opposed to saying, no, there's abundance. Everybody wins. If we get everybody up to a median wage and create an additional $2 billion of economy in our city, that's good for everybody. So we've got to stop people having a look at this from win-lose perspective. So there's a moral reason, there's an economic reason, and the third is a public safety reason. And I referred to it earlier in terms of the civil unrest in our streets. People are fed up. People are fed up in our cities. Our minority populations have been disadvantaged and mistreated for hundreds of years in our community, and you see the same unrest in our rural communities in this last presidential election. So there's a way to come together here to pull all this together, but we've got to get together to keep our country safe as well.
I think you guys are being way too polite.
Now we're going to have it.
I do not think we should mince words when we are talking about the bully in chief. His behavior is so antithetical to Oakland values, and that in some ways it's actually brought the fight out in us. It was about a year ago, we have an annual, gala for the Oakland Promise, and we made the stupid mistake of having it 2 days after Election Day. And so literally nobody was in the mood to party until the students got up to speak. And those students talked about what the American dream really is. And it actually was one of the most energizing nights I have ever experienced, because we realized in that place that no matter who was in the White House, they could not take away our American dream. And that we in our city could take that on, claim it, live it, and do something about it right in our community. And we have not stopped. This year, I held my State of the City address in our Islamic Cultural Center as a symbol of how much this whole city is standing against everything, the tone that has come out of that administration. And I hope that we all make the lemonade out of this orange lemon that is energizing our bases, getting people to get engaged in the work that we are doing. That is the opportunity.
So that's the final question. Thank you.
Sorry, I want to jump in on this too.
Before you
I can't
respond,
let
Mayor
this go
Lurz,
by.
well, maybe you can answer this question as well in your final. You get the final word here.
Right.
So what you've done is remarkable, not just in Providence, but you've also been involved in discussions about creating a national children's accord for mayors to support an integrated approach to improving the lives of children. So. Talk to us about the potential of kind of a bottom-up movement for improving the well-being of children, and what cities and city leaders like yourself can play a role in that.
Can I talk about Trump first?
Talk about anything you want.
Only if it's funny.
So, yeah, I mean, there's so much anxiety in our communities right now. And one thing that has changed for me since Trump got elected is that I realized that you can't assume that the public and people know what you're fighting for and where you come from. So this question of values. And so I've made it a point to be much more explicit in every conversation and speech that I give about where I'm coming from and why we're fighting this fight. And in fact, so between the election day and inauguration, my team and I, we basically went through every group that candidate Trump insulted during the campaign.
And the list was long.
And it was a long list. And so each week between the election and inauguration, we rolled out either a new initiative, a new program, or a new announcement, or a new gathering, where we specifically addressed those communities and reassured them that they're home in Providence. So we've been a lot more intentional and a lot more vocal about articulating, where we come from and what we're fighting for. Another thing that has changed since Election Day, and I think this is true across the board with all mayors, is that whereas in the past perhaps we would have ceded ground on some spaces, thinking, well, this isn't necessarily a very local issue, it's an international issue, it's a federal issue. Now we're realizing that all these issues are absolutely local. And I think immigration is the perfect example. If kids are afraid to go to school because of ICE, we deal with it at the local level. If parents are afraid to call the police or to testify as witnesses, we feel it at the local level. So we've seen it there. We've also seen it on climate change. As the federal government has retreated from its leadership role, mayors have stepped up and said, we are more than willing to lead in this space. And by amplifying each other's voice, we're able to drive the conversation and drive the agenda at a national level. And one other area where we're looking to drive that national conversation is around education and social mobility. The truth is that we're getting our butts whooped right now when compared to other developed countries on social mobility. And think about what that says about something as core as our national identity, right? What does it mean to be American? If anything, it means that if you bust your tail, you work hard, and you play by the rules, you can work your way up to a middle-class lifestyle and provide for your family. But that's not only less likely than not to be true, but it's becoming progressively less likely to be true. So what direction are we heading in on social mobility and inequality in our country? We're definitely heading in the wrong direction. And so that's another area where I believe us mayors, we are ready to lead. We're ready to take a stand. So once again, that's a very local issue. Cradle to career approaches, early childhood learning, K through 12 systems, summer learning, after school, blended learning, online learning tools, workforce opportunities afterwards. Those are all levers that we as mayors control. And what we're looking to do is similar to the climate accord, where you had 300 plus cities sign on to these set of principles that in spite of government stepping back from its leadership role, we're going to step into it. We want to do the same thing around social mobility and have a national, maybe even international children's accord, where we help kids go from, kids get to middle class by middle age, middle quintile by the age of 40. We hold the most important levers that can impact that, so we want to amplify each other's voice to make that a reality.
Thank you so much. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Please, if you have a question, come up to the microphone and identify yourself. Just say your name and your affiliation, and address your question either to one mayor or to all of them. And please, questions only. So if you have more thoughts than can be contained in 30 seconds, we'd love to talk to you afterwards, but please keep it concise so multiple people can have a chance to get a word in. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kevin Evans. I'm a student here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I'm glad you started off the discussion today talking about the ambiguity of what a city is, because the idea of a city can be distinct and sometimes at odds with the actual people that make up that city. So I'm wondering how you navigate conflicts here, where like economic development in a city that could theoretically marginalize and push out, price out populations that have been there for a long time. I know Oakland has dealt with this. I assume the rest of you have.
Yeah, we're dealing with it in Somerville. We're in this region, the Metro Boston region. We're the second most gentrifying region outside of Oakland. I mean, there's some dynamics impacting that. One, and we're in a housing crisis. We're also a region that's trying to grow. If we don't grow, we stay stagnant and static, we're going to die because we can't raise the revenue to invest in all these critical programs and needs that we have as a community. But when we think of, Mayor Fisher mentioned cities as incubators of human opportunity, are we giving people a real and authentic opportunity and choice to live there, to rent a home, to buy a home, to start a business, to send their kids to school, and so forth? And we've taken this really systems-based approach, which has led us into this conversation by all means as a community, understand, how do we, guided by our orienting value, being an exceptional place to live, work, play, raise a family, is that true? Is that an opportunity for everyone living in our community? It's a difficult challenge. The conversations and the systems work and the community work and the adaptive work is local, but it's also regional. So as we think about development, we want to leverage development, since you brought it up, back to the human scale, not just how it impacts how we move, but reinvesting back in the community. It's difficult because Somerville, for example, and every state's different. Somerville's it was a city of very little resources up until a few years ago. The city set out a plan for growth over the next couple of decades, and we're starting to realize that. And we're taking that and that revenue and that resource and reinvesting back into community values. However, there is displacement happening across every neighborhood and every city in this region. While we're making advances on the production of housing side, and on my street, for example, we're losing units that were somewhat affordable still. And we're trying to deal with that. So one of the things we're leading, I'll say, for this metro region here is myself, Mayor Walsh, and others will be making an announcement soon of leading a regional housing plan tied to mobility and workforce development. Because if we don't tie really in a systems level approach across the region, what's going to happen is we're going to concentrate poverty more intensely and more remotely. Big challenge, and this is one of the adaptive challenges of our times in this region.
To answer your first question, if you want to make everyone happy, this is not the job choice for you. Okay, so that's just to get that out of the way.
Work in a pet shop.
Yeah. That's a good one.
I like that one.
And raising housing affordability is absolutely relevant to this conversation because at least in Oakland, the displacement and housing insecurity absolutely are impacting our children's ability to learn and thrive. So it is, just to add on to what he said, it's not just one thing that's going to fix it. I wish that 20 years ago, we on a regional level had fixed it because the Bay Area has been adding 8 new jobs for every 1 new unit of housing, and we've been doing that for years. So it's very important to have that regional lens, and then to recognize you can't just build your way out of the problem. Although building is very important, you've got to strengthen renter protections. And so we've got just cause, we've got rent control, and we're trying to modify California's state law that prohibits cities from expanding a lot of those protections while we build.
I'll just add a quick comment on that.
Sure.
It's more of a cultural comment. We, as a society, we've really lost balance in a lot of these areas, right? So right now, people think about what's most important is the maximum return on capital deployed. Therefore, let's have more expensive homes in Oakland and Somerville, and that's what we should do. Versus saying, no, that's not the value of the city. We want affordable housing throughout the city in every neighborhood. We think everybody should have an affordable place to live. They should have food security, et cetera. These are alien conversations in America right now, unfortunately. And they've become more and more so as we've advanced over these last couple of decades. So we really have got to bring it back to the basics to say, do we really think everybody should have an affordable place to live? Should everybody have food on the table? Should everybody have a shot at a good education? Well, and again, I think we'll come back to that at some point in time, but that needs to be integrated more in the national and local dialogues.
Can we also hear from Mayor Elorza? I know you're working in economic development and inclusive growth for Providence. So how do you respond to this dilemma?
Yeah, we come at it from the same place. Providence is at an interesting moment right now. We've lagged behind. Our economies have lagged behind both Massachusetts and Connecticut for a long time, but we're catching up. But already we're seeing prices rise on rent and property values. This is before the jobs have come. Now that the jobs are coming, we anticipate that the prices are going to rise even faster. And so, this is great that our city is on the move, we're growing, we're progressing. But the last thing that I would want is for us to find ourselves in a position where that progress can't be enjoyed by the people who grew up there, who lived there, who worked there, who are invested there. And so we're trying to be as proactive as possible. And we're doing a lot around abandoned properties right now. We have a growing homelessness challenge, but how can we have a homelessness challenge at the same time that you have hundreds of abandoned properties? It just makes no sense. And they've been abandoned for 10 years. So we're very aggressively working on that so that we have a built-in affordable housing strategy to address many of the challenges that we see coming down the pike.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I have a question about engaging communities. So most of my work, I spent pretty much all my life in helping communities with cultural competency and really just developing a sense of empathy in terms of understanding each other and where they're coming from. You mentioned about engaging communities yourself. How do you do that in the most effective way when so many members of your own community don't speak even English? How do you do that when cultural gestures are maybe misinterpreted from one person to another? And so how do you do that in that macro level? I'd love to know that. And after you answer that, you'll see me leave, but it's not because of what you said.
So I'd like to start. We found about a few years ago, we pride ourselves on our communication ability, how we get data out to the public. We like to say we have 360 degrees of capacity of communication and 10 miles deep. But we found that more than our foreign-born population wasn't receiving more than 90% of those communications. So how can we earn and gain credibility and trust with the people we need to help solve issues around public health, public safety, and to grow a community? How can I have them feel comfortable about engaging me as their mayor and letting them know that this is their community mayor and this is their police department? So we developed a program in Somerville, and the Somerville Public Schools did a tremendous job about this and how they engage parents, called Summer Viva, where we have actually language and cultural liaisons. And we started to do a lot of in-depth analysis about what is the best way to engage people one-on-one. So it's as simple as how we communicate with them with technology that they're used to, or going to the supermarkets that really a lot of our foreign population go to, or to the houses of worship. We hold health fairs. For example, we held it at the Brazilian church this past weekend. We do our resident statistic meetings that we do across the city, but we do more culturally focused on foreign speaking populations as well. So we try to compound and embed a very thorough approach now to engage in those populations, understanding their cultural sensitivities, and really what are the conduits to best reach them. So we're seeing a greater uptick, much more participation from our different populations, which we hadn't seen before. And the response back is that they're hearing more about city programs, they're gaining better trust, they're feeling safer in Somerville, notwithstanding what's happened in Washington.
Two quick things. One, Oakland has long had an equal access law, and that means we have a legal mandate to provide translation, to translate materials, and to provide bilingual employees in public contact positions. So if you don't have that in your city, check it out. Specific to the Oakland Promise, we're really excited about our ambassador program. So we have ambassadors that are from the communities that we most want to impact. A number of our ambassadors are not English speaking, and so we accommodate that, and that was intentional because that's a population we specifically want to reach. And the ambassadors not only are celebrated ambassadors of the program to actually go out and communicate, but they actually have kind of a co-creation and leadership role with us. They tell us if we need to change things about the programs, if the program is not working for their community. So it's not just that you want people of different cultures to hear your information, you want to also listen to them.
So,
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
So you also have to be comfortable giving up control. So I'll give you an example this on a different topic, but I think it speaks to the question. So I was listening to a presentation about this group that addresses violent crime. And the point that the presenter made is oftentimes we say, this person is so far gone, he doesn't care about anyone. And, the point is that's not true, right? He doesn't care about us. He could care less about us, but there's someone out there in the community that can reach them. And one thing that I think we've done well in Providence is that we've been comfortable giving up complete control and using community leaders to help deliver our message, or using community leaders to engage the public that we wouldn't be able to reach directly. And there's some very difficult communities to reach. It might be very difficult to get the undocumented immigrant community to come to a forum where we'll have the state police or the Providence police or or other groups. So understanding that sometimes we might have the message, but we aren't the best messengers.
Thank you. Question over here.
Hi, thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of your commitments to collective impact, to breaking down silos, doing more interdisciplinary work, to push forward all the issues that we care about in education, child development. But I also, from experience, know it's so much harder to make that table bigger and to kind of bring more people in sometimes. Would love to get any advice you have about sort of tactically or what sort of leadership practices you've been able to employ to make that work and to get results out of kind of that maybe a bit more chaotic or messier process.
Great question. Who would like to start?
Sure.
You've already revealed one of your secrets.
But it's just intentionality has got to be there to make sure that your table looks like the faces of the community, and oftentimes it looks more like people like me than the broad swath of the community. So we're alert and attentive to that and try to make sure that that is not the case in the community. And there's also an issue there of who's ready to be at the table, and there's capacity building required, so that's perfectly okay. Everybody brings a different lens. So I may not be ready to be at the table in terms of understanding, let's say, the difficulties of an undocumented community. But an undocumented community might be ready to be at the table to broaden that lens for us. So how do you get as many perspectives as possible there so that you can really make your solutions rich? I haven't found an easy way to do it.
Yeah, I'd like to think that one of our successes has been letting people see how it benefits them. So, for example, with rolling out these college savings accounts for babies, we work with implementation partners. And so when Alameda County's home visit nurse goes to visit a client, she's not only showing, or he or she is not only showing up to provide health care, but now gets to say, hey, and guess what? I'm offering your baby a $500 college savings account. Like, how fun to deliver that news. We have a longtime nonprofit that's been doing scholarships and persistence supports. We've helped fund, we didn't create a new scholarship delivery and management system. We just have raised money to let them scale to a much larger audience. we've tried to help people see themselves in this continuum, in this cradle to career continuum, and to see how when we are all coordinating our efforts, we all are doing a better job, and that's what we all came to do.
Mayor Curtatone, you've used the term institutionalizing curiosity.
Yeah.
That's a signature Curtatone phrase. And so can you explain, to this question, like, what does that mean? So how does that work? Because it seems to be a crucial element to your leadership.
Well, there's two things. How do you get people to want to work? And I go back, it's that value statement, that plexus value stream. For instance, when Mayor Schaaf said, I think not only 20% of the ninth graders will be moving on to secondary higher education, 10%. That for me got me on the edge of my seat. And if I'm in Oakland, I'm like, how can I help and work and be part of that? That's sort of how you raise a disequilibrium. And then, how do you enable collaborative creativity? How do you create that bump factor? I think, people bring these qualities. Sometimes they're inherent. You got to bring them out. I always look for, folks who have a passion for curiosity and willingness to be abnormal. Two variables, I think, that spark innovation. I think that's where I think some of
area.
Yeah, and you're very abnormal. You just don't know it yet. But how do you institutionalize that? Is really I go back. How do you enable collaborative creativity? And getting people to own the work is really sparking the disequilibrium. It doesn't have to be negative. It could be the opportunity that's at hand. So.
Great. Thank you. Over here.
Hi. I just wanted to first say thank you to Mayor Elorza. I'm a high school English teacher, and hearing about the positive message you're trying to send about public education is very exciting. My question had to do with rhetoric. A lot of those discussions around the rhetoric in politics has been heavy in my classes. And I think in terms of education policy, there's been a lot of rhetoric around like No Child Left Behind and a lot of negativity in terms of educational change. I'm just curious the trickle-down effect at the state and local level, whether you've had to combat like even the names of your movements are really positive, and so are some of the federal ones that haven't necessarily actually been positive. So how have you kind of combated that federal versus local rhetoric?
Before you answer, let's get two more questions in, and those will be the final questions, and then give all of you an opportunity to answer any of the questions that were posed. Okay, sir?
Hi, thank you. So my question is two-part questions around looking at education. I've been wondering two things. Does size matter? And also the time the mayors are in office. Specifically looking at New York City, I was part of the Bloomberg administration seeing the transformation in education. And one of the questions it was curious for me is education became a strategic arm of the Bloomberg administration in the transformation of New York. And there are areas where great progress was made in small schools and their communities development in areas where the education in just a couple of blocks are very strong and people moved to those communities and the city improved. But I wonder if the size of a city can impact the transformation or the longevity of the mayors in office. But the other question with that is, I live in Newton, and it's amazing to see how the systems are so aligned. The library is connected with the schools, and the YMCA is the most amazing center for the community, and there's arts programs, and it's so embedded. But our question, is it only possible because of the size, or is it possible because of education as part of the strategic arm of the administration, because it empowers the community to become more wealthy, because people move to the communities based on the capacity of the education system? So that's the two-part question. Great. Is it the size or?
Rhetoric, longevity, size. Sir.
Hi, Pierre Chetgan, Graduate School of Education, UC Berkeley. Just really glad to have made it and to catch part of the conversation. Thank you really for sharing. My question is kind of related to the previous question in the earlier segment on gentrification and the role of arts and artists in this whole process of institutionalizing curiosity, creativity, creative design. and what happens when artist communities get displaced through the effects of gentrification? Thank you.
Great question. Who would like to start?
So I'll take I guess this will be my parting
may
shot.
I remind you, we have 3 minutes on the clock.
All right, I'll be very quick.
It's hard being a mayor and being confined to a little bit of
That's
time,
true.
but let's try it. Okay, Mayor
On
Larson.
this question of rhetoric, sure, we all play the game too. You know, if we need to make a statement about our values and make it a pointed point, I mean, we do that as well. But at the end of the day, we get evaluated on the brass tacks issues. Are we balancing budgets? Are we filling potholes? Are we educating our kids and providing public safety? So it's often said that there are 3 main political parties in the United States. There are Republicans, there are Democrats, and there are mayors. Right? And mayors, we're just focused on getting things done. We're not focused or we're not interested in winning arguments. We're interested in solving problems. And we're not driven by ideology, we're driven by evidence. And so that's what's so encouraging and what makes me so optimistic about the state of our country, that you have mayors stepping up with this attitude and this mindset, and they're taking leadership roles.
Thank you. Mayor Fisher?
I'll just comment on the arts part of it there. We have been increasingly investing in underinvested areas of our cities relative to arts and the type of creativity and innovation that's coming when we're colliding non-traditional areas with traditional areas, is producing all types of new art forms in our city, new partnerships as well, that then expand the consciousness of the community about what else is available. So it's a very encouraging area for us.
And I'll chime in on that too. This might State of the City this year, the theme was resilience. And I talked about how in Oakland, it's not just the strength of our roads and our physical infrastructure, it's the strength of our social cohesion, our connectedness as human beings. And there is no stronger builder of that than culture and the arts. It is truly where we come together. And that is why we're about to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Ghost Ship fire. I don't know if any of you remember that tragedy from last year. It has been just such a deep, deep wound for our community because it touches on so many of our challenges right now. But this idea of not just thinking about holding people in their communities and allowing them to put down their roots, but tending to your vulnerable communities first. And artists are one of those vulnerable communities that play such an important role, not in, we like to say in Oakland, placemaking, but in place keeping.
Thank you.
Just briefly on the arts, thanks for the question. We pride ourselves in Somerville for our creativity, our originality, our diversity in the artist community. We're second per capita for artists just to Manhattan. But we're concerned about displacement because if we're not given a real opportunity for people to stay and be part of our community, and whether it's our diversity, our creative population, we start to lose the soul of the community. So, certainly on our priority list of how we try to allow those opportunities to be real for artists as well. I did want to speak to the question about the size of city longevity. I don't. It's not about the size, but I think you get great lessons in terms of systems-based analysis about what. Great cities like Boston and New York, that have seen great gains. There are still quarters or neighborhoods that are on the opposite side, on the losing side of the equity argument. And the question is why. We had this conversation briefly with Paul about, really the failures of busing, and how they never addressed the inequities in those neighborhoods, but move students around to so-called better schools. So there are great lessons to be learned there. But on the duration, I think we spoke to a longevity in office. I think it's an important point. I can't tell you how many decisions I still have to deal with from some mayor 30 years ago because I have 2-year terms. When I go someday, I'll change it, move to change it next to 4-year terms. Some mayor said, I'm not going to fight for that that major, rail expansion project because that's 15 years out. I probably won't be the mayor. I'm going to cash in my political chips for X, Y, Z. I'm not going to take this important systems-based, community-based work, adaptive work. Really, I just want to get my money for this school to be built. We need people to take long-term risks based on community values and to work hard and diligently for that. So I believe, elect people to office, we're going to give them the terms necessary to do the job. Whether we want to limit them or not, we can have those conversations community by community, but they shouldn't have to run every 2 years. I want them to act today with an eye on tomorrow. That was a good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our conversation. I think we can be very fortunate to have public leaders such as yourselves, and we have a lot to learn from you. It's very encouraging to see the energy and the new ideas and the efforts at the local level. To you, if you want to be involved, engaged in this work, there are a couple of opportunities. Joe Curtatone and I teach a field course at the Kennedy School that's open to all of Harvard. So if you want to really roll up your sleeves and work in Massachusetts communities on better management practices, better policies, do take a look at that. We'd love to see you. We're also hiring a lot of students in fellowship roles and assistants to work with the other mayors that are represented here and 37 other mayors around the country with the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative. So if you're interested in getting engaged in work in cities, please do contact us and look us up, and you may have an opportunity to work with those any or all of those inspiring leaders. So thank me, help me in thanking our mayors.